Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is where we really get into a stat of sources and pull out what matters most. Today, we're exploring a really special connection, the one between grandparents and their grandchildren, especially when ADHD is, part of the family picture. It's a relationship that has just immense potential for support, but wow, it can also navigate some really complex, sometimes hidden issues.
That's so true. And for this deep dive, we've gathered some, I think, incredibly insightful materials. We have guides written specifically for grandparents about ADHD. We've also got some very raw personal stories from parents shared on places like Reddit. And maybe most importantly, expert insights on how ADHD often shows up, particularly in girls and teens, which, as we'll definitely get into, can look quite different from that classic stereotype.
Right. So our mission today is really to shed light on both the challenges and, maybe more importantly, the huge opportunities for supporting young people with ADHD within their families. We'll be looking closely at those subtle ways ADHD can manifest, especially in girls, and the absolutely vital role that all family members play. We're basically here to pull out those key nuggets of understanding from these sources to help you get really well informed. So, yeah, let's dig in.
Okay.
As we look through the sources, one idea really leaped out at me. Some people are calling it the grandparent paradox. It really highlights this incredible potential grandparents have to be, well, almost like a superhero figure, a steady, comforting presence.
It's true, that grandparent-grandchild bond. It's often something quite special. It tends to be, a bit removed from the daily grind of rules and schedules. And that can create a naturally calmer, less judgmental space. The place where a child with ADHD might feel genuinely heard, genuinely understood, just being that consistent, loving, accepting presence. It's fundamental. Especially when, let's face it, kids with ADHD and their parents often encounter a lot of judgment out there.
Yeah, and it's not just emotional, is it? Grandparents can offer really practical help. Like, think about giving parents a much-needed date night, or maybe taking a grandchild for a fun afternoon. The key thing, though, seems to be following the parent's lead on things, right? For consistency.
You are absolutely spot on. Consistency is just vital. But here's where that paradox you mentioned really comes into focus, because we often see this generational gap, diagnoses like ADHD. They can be confusing or maybe just totally unfamiliar for grandparents who didn't really see this when they were raising their own kids. There was one Reddit post that just captured this perfectly.
Oh, that Reddit post. It was such a clear picture. It was a parent whose own mother, the grandmother, basically just dismissed her granddaughter's ADHD, called it an excuse for behavior. She even, rolled her eyes about her own daughter's diagnosis. And the irony, the really striking part, the same grandmother apparently used language from her sobriety journey, her own isms, to explain her behaviors. It's just such a clear double standard.
It is, and what's really telling is how common that viewpoint still seems to be. Comments on that very post pointed out that, quote, many older people even think it's not a real thing aside from the hyper part. That's trend. It really underscores how hard it is to explain ADHD to someone who doesn't live it. And then you layer on the clashing parenting styles. Maybe the parent is trying a gentle communicative approach while the grandparent leans towards something stricter, maybe more feel-based.
And connecting this to the wider context, it goes beyond just differences of opinion sometimes. The reality of what are called grand families, where grandparents are actually the primary caregivers, that's a huge factor. And the data shows children in these grandparent-led homes are disproportionately more likely to have ADHD. That creates a whole other set of challenges.
It really does. It makes you think about the specific struggles these grandparents must face. They talk about feeling socially isolated, not quite fitting in with their peers or with younger parents at school events. There can be real difficulty just keeping up with new medication options or even social media trends that impact their grandkids. Sometimes schools might see ADHD only as a behavior problem, not grasping the neurodevelopmental side. Plus, just the physical energy required and often financial constraints. Those are major things.
Absolutely. Yet, despite all those really significant challenges, there's this surprising insight from many grandparents in that primary caregiver role. They often say things like, I'm way more patient now, or I'm a far better parent than when I raised my own kids. And they mention being more willing to listen and be less reactive. It really speaks to the potential for growth and empathy, even when things are incredibly tough.
It really does.
That whole discussion about generational understanding, it flows right into another really critical area that's often misunderstood, ADHD in girls. For such a long time, our picture of ADHD was almost entirely based on hyperactive boys, which meant, well, girls were often just undiagnosed and unaddressed.
Yeah, a really key point from the sources is that even when the diagnostic criteria expanded back in 1980 to include inattention, it's still, maybe unintentionally, overrepresented behaviors more typically seen in boys. So that ADHD girl style, as some call it, it just got missed a lot. Girls are often more the inattentive type, the daydreamers, rather than the obviously bouncing off the walls hyperactive. Their physical restlessness might just look like, fiddling with their hair or picking at their nails,
Yep.
much more subtle.
Right. So they can come across as passive students. Quiet, maybe hesitant to ask for help, which is just tragic because it means their intelligence can be really underestimated. And here's something really fascinating. Many girls with ADHD apparently use up tremendous psychic energy just trying to hold it together to control themselves at school. And then the consequences, they really let loose at home.
Yeah.
Parents see it, but the school might have no idea. It's like this hidden energy cost.
Exactly, like an energy debt that comes due later. And this hidden nature has big implications, especially as they get older. One of the really striking things is that symptoms in girls often seem to intensify with puberty and estrogen,
Mhm.
which is actually the opposite of the typical trajectory for boys. So you might see more emotional reactivity, more anxiety, mood swings. And these could be, as one source put it, intensified monthly by those premenstrual hormonal shifts.
Wow, the opposite trajectory. That's huge. And this also leads to significant lags in social and emotional maturity compared to their peers without ADHD. So they might find it harder to connect with friends their age, maybe miss social cues. They face this really difficult balancing act, it was called. Their physiology is kind of hypersensitive, seeking high stimulation, which might lead them impulsively towards things like social media, maybe even riskier things like problematic relationships with food, caffeine, alcohol, drugs, even sex. Or on the flip side, if they're understimulated, they can just become lethargic, really unmotivated.
And if you layer the broader social context onto this, cultural expectations, they play a massive and often quite damaging role. Girls are, traditionally expected to be neat, organized, compliant, sensitive, and that just clashes, often dramatically, with their sometimes unpredictable executive functions. Think of executive functions as the brain's air traffic control planning, organizing, impulse control. For girls with ADHD, that controller can be, well, a bit unreliable sometimes. And the result, they often internalize their shame about feeling different. They blame themselves, thinking, I'm stupid. This is different from boys, who might be more likely to externalize blame. This internal struggle, it erodes self-esteem, fuels anxiety, depressive feelings, and often makes them try to hide their struggles even more.
That's a really profound impact. There was this concept in one source, the triple bind for all girls. Needing to be good at girl things, good at guy things, and make it all look easy and attractive. But for girls with ADHD, it becomes a quadruple bind.
Mhm.
So add a fourth layer, masking their internal struggles, trying desperately to fit neurotypical expectations that just don't align with how their brain works.
Yeah.
That creates this immense, often invisible pressure and stress. It sounds incredibly damaging.
It really can be.
So, okay, knowing all this, how do we actually empower and communicate effectively? With ADHD youth and also with their caregivers, the sources had some really powerful practical strategies, starting with foundational support. It really comes down to constant positive reinforcement, praising the effort, even if the outcome wasn't perfect, and responding to anger or frustration with empathy, not, just cracking down harder.
Absolutely. And helping them build emotional regulation skills is just crucial. For younger kids, that might look like really listening, asking how they feel, maybe drawing pictures about it, or using a stuffed animal to kind of act out feelings. For teenagers, emotional dysregulation is a major hurdle because
Yes.
their prefrontal cortex, that brain control tower we mentioned, for judgment and impulse control, it's still very much under construction, often until their mid-20s.
Wow, mid-20s. That means as a parent, your own self-regulation is just paramount. Like one source said, your agitation only adds fuel to your child's fire. You really have to model calmness. Notice when you're getting agitated. Take deep breaths, pause, recenter yourself first. It's like you have to recalibrate your own system before you can help them.
Yeah, exactly. Which brings up a good question. How do you handle those really intense moments? The time apart method was suggested as a practical tool. The idea is, in a calm moment before things escalate, you discuss triggers with your team. Talk about how they'd ideally like to respond. Identify that cycle of escalating behaviors you both get into. And then institute a planned time apart. Not a punishment, but a planned break. Needs to be at least 30 minutes, apparently, for the brain and body chemistry to actually reset. Help them make a list beforehand of helpful things they can do during that break. And then, this is key, give specific positive feedback when they follow the plan. Like, hey, I really appreciate that you took that space when things got heated.
That sounds really structured and helpful. Beyond the emotional side, the communication itself needs to adapt, right? Especially with teens. There's this shift, it seems, in parenting teens with ADHD, moving from being the hands-on helper to more of an advisor, maybe a confidant, and that takes a lot of patience, strong listening skills, really letting the teen feel heard without jumping in to judge or fix immediately.
It's interesting, isn't it? Parents have all this life experience, but teens often don't see the value right away. So some practical communication tips came up. Giving teens space to study without hovering, which means managing your own anxiety as a parent. Understanding, especially for girls, how those monthly hormonal shifts can intensify ADHD symptoms, making requests, not ultimatums. That builds trust. Allowing teens time to actually process information and form an answer. Maybe even suggesting they write things down if they need to collect their thoughts. And like we said before, offering specific praise, not just generic good job, but I was really impressed by how you advocated for yourself in that meeting.
Specific praise. Got it. And all of this really connects back to those crucial executive function skills,
Mhm.
underdeveloped executive functions. That's a core reason for a lot of that adolescent turbulence, right? The confusion, high emotions, impulsive decisions. And these skills, they aren't just absorbed by osmosis, they have to be explicitly taught, with parents acting, at least initially, as kind of an external frontal lobe to help guide them.
That's such a critical point. And the teens' buy-in is absolutely essential. They need help acknowledging their challenges, not denying them. Otherwise, you risk low self-esteem, apathy, blaming everyone else. Another really vital strategy mentioned was helping them find a passion. Something they genuinely love doing. This can actually help prevent risky behaviors. It provides healthy highs, builds real self-esteem, and often leads to positive friendships around that shared interest.
Finding a passion, that makes so much sense. So what can parents actually do to help improve those executive function skills? There were several strategies listed, like assuming behaviors stem from skill deficits, not just laziness. That's a big mindset shift.
Yeah.
Picking your battles, you can't fight everything. Using natural or logical consequences instead of arbitrary punishments. Being willing to negotiate sometimes. Involving third parties like tutors or coaches can be really helpful. Building in ways to verify things are getting done without nagging. Offering that effective praise. Focusing on effort and resilience. Setting realistic goals together, and just offering a really wide range of opportunities so they can discover that passion. It's all geared towards empowering them to become, eventually, self-starters and advocates for their own needs.
Yeah. Building that self-advocacy is the ultimate goal.
Wow, what an incredibly rich deep dive today. We've covered so much ground. From, the powerful and sometimes tricky role grandparents play, to those often hidden ways ADHD shows up in girls, and then digging into really essential strategies for communication and empowerment for young people with ADHD and their families.
Yeah, I think we've really underscored that supporting anyone with ADHD, but maybe especially girls and teens, it requires truly understanding their unique journey. It means adopting communication styles that work for them, not against them, and explicitly teaching those crucial executive function skills. And when the whole family, particularly grandparents, are informed and crucially aligned with the parents, their role becomes just irreplaceable, profoundly important.
It really is. So, as you, our listener, reflect on all this, maybe consider the profound, the really lasting impact of early recognition, of deep understanding, and just unconditional acceptance within the family. What if, instead of seeing neurodiversity as some kind of flaw that needs fixing, what if we truly embraced it? Saw it as just a unique and valuable way of experiencing the world. Imagine how empowering that shift could be, allowing young people to genuinely thrive, to advocate for themselves confidently throughout life, even when they bump up against older, maybe outdated societal views. It's definitely a powerful thought to carry forward.